All right, so today we're going to be diving deep into a topic that I think a lot of people are interested in. It's men's sexual vitality, and specifically erectile dysfunction. We got this book called Revitalizing Intimacy, a modern guide to men's sexual vitality. And it's pretty fascinating. It's got a really unique approach to ED. Instead of treating it like it's just something that happens when you get older, it frames it as like a warning sign, almost like a check engine light for your overall health.
Yeah, it's really interesting how they present it. They use this metaphor of the penis being like a barometer of health. It really makes you think about how your sexual health is connected to everything else going on in your body.
Yeah, exactly. And the book doesn't just focus on like treating the symptoms. It takes this really holistic approach, looking at things like exercise and diet, and even the role of medications, which I thought was really interesting, and like the mind-body connection, and even redefining what intimacy means. Plus, it's full of these stories about men who've actually overcome ED. Did you know that like 70% of cases are linked to things that we can actually prevent? Like there's this one story about a guy who reversed his ED in just 3 months by making some pretty simple lifestyle changes. It's pretty encouraging.
Yeah, that's what I found so hopeful about it. It really emphasizes that you're not just stuck with ED. There are things you can do to take control of your sexual health.
Exactly. So let's start with something I think we can all agree on. Exercise. The book really stresses the link between exercise and healthy blood flow, which is obviously crucial for, for everything to work properly down there.
Right, and the science behind it is pretty straightforward. Erections depend on having strong, flexible blood vessels, and exercise helps with that in a few key ways. First of all, it boosts the production of nitric oxide, which is basically like this magic potion that relaxes and widens those blood vessels. So it's paving the way for smoother blood flow.
Okay, so it's not just about building muscles. It's about actually creating like a better pathway for the blood to get where it needs to go. And speaking of pathways, I noticed the book highlights brisk walking as a particularly effective exercise. They even mention a Harvard study that found just 30 minutes a day can reduce your risk of ED by 41%. That's huge. Do you think any kind of walking counts? Or does it have to be like that power walking you see people doing in the park?
Well, the key is to get your heart rate up a bit. So it should be a pace where you can still talk but not really sing. You know what else the book recommends? Kegel exercises.
Kegels. I thought those were just for women.
They're actually super beneficial for men, too. They strengthen those pelvic floor muscles, which help trap blood in the penis during an erection.
Interesting. I always thought those were just for like bladder control.
Nope, they help with everything working properly down there.
So are there any exercises we should avoid? I'm kind of a cycling enthusiast myself, and now I'm wondering if I should be worried.
That's a good question. While any exercise is generally better than none, there are a few activities to be mindful of, and long-distance cycling is one of them. The prolonged pressure from the bike seat can actually compress a major nerve and artery in the pelvic region, which can reduce blood flow. And studies have shown a link between long-distance cycling and a higher risk of ED.
Oh, wow. Okay. I had no idea. So shorter rides and maybe investing in one of those fancy ergonomic seats are probably a good idea.
Exactly. It's all about finding a balance and listening to your body.
Makes sense. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The book tells the story of this teacher named Mark, who was struggling with ED. And he actually managed to regain his erectile function and his confidence through exercise. It wasn't some crazy boot camp or anything. He just started incorporating more movement into his daily routine. It's a pretty inspiring story.
It really shows that change is possible at any age. It's not about becoming an Olympian. It's just about finding activities you enjoy and making them a regular part of your life.
Okay, so we've got the exercise piece of the puzzle figured out. Now let's talk about food. Everyone's always looking for that magic bullet. So is there a miracle food for erectile health?
Well, there's no single food that can magically cure ED, but the book makes a strong case for the Mediterranean diet as being a real powerhouse when it comes to sexual vitality. And it's not just about what it does for your erections. It's about overall health and well-being.
Right. I've heard great things about the Mediterranean diet. But what is it about this specific way of eating that makes it so beneficial for, for this particular area?
It's all about the nutrients. This diet is packed with ingredients that promote healthy blood flow and combat inflammation, which we know is a major culprit in ED. It's like giving your body the building blocks it needs to function optimally.
Okay, that makes sense. So give us the shopping list. What are some of those key nutrients and where can we find them?
Well, one of the stars of the show is L-arginine, which is a precursor to nitric oxide, that magical compound we talked about that helps blood vessels relax. You can find L-arginine in foods like walnuts, lentils, and even dark chocolate. Then there's zinc, which is crucial for testosterone production. Oysters are a good source. But you can also get zinc from pumpkin seeds, beef, and chickpeas.
Whole on oysters, so it's not just an old wives' tale.
Not at all. They actually have a solid nutritional basis for being considered an aphrodisiac. And don't forget about omega-3 fatty acids. They're like little warriors that fight inflammation in your blood vessels. You can find them in fatty fish like salmon, flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. Those are a double whammy because they have that L-arginine too.
Okay, so we're loading up on the good stuff. What about things to avoid? I have a feeling processed foods aren't doing us any favors in this department.
You're absolutely right. Processed meats, trans fats, and added sugars are the villains here. They contribute to inflammation, damage blood vessels, and make it harder for your body to function properly. There's even a study that linked sugary drink consumption to a 50% higher risk of ED. So those sodas and energy drinks might give you a temporary boost, but they could be hurting you in the long run.
Wow, 50%. That's a pretty compelling reason to ditch the soda. And it's not just about ED, it's about your overall health. But back to the good stuff. I noticed the book actually lays out a really practical 7-day Mediterranean meal plan, which I thought was awesome because it takes the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, and it even emphasizes budget-friendly options like canned sardines, which are an excellent source of those omega-3s we talked about.
Perfect. So we're eating like Greek gods, getting plenty of exercise. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I guess medications could throw a wrench in the works, right? That was a sector that really surprised me. It turns out some pretty common medications can be sneaky saboteurs when it comes to sexual health.
It's true, medications that people take every day for conditions like depression, high blood pressure, even allergies can have unintended side effects that impact erectile function. It's definitely something that's not talked about enough.
Yeah, the book specifically mentions antidepressants, blood pressure medications, and even some antihistamines as potential culprits.
Right, and the crazy thing is, studies suggest that around 30% of ED cases are linked to medication side effects. Yet very few men actually discuss this with their doctors. It's almost like a taboo subject.
That's a really important point. So what can you do if you suspect your meds might be the problem? Should you just stop taking them?
Absolutely not. Don't stop taking any prescribed medication without consulting your doctor. The first step is to have an open and honest conversation with them about your concerns. They may be able to adjust the dosage, switch you to an alternative medication with fewer side effects, or even suggest certain supplements to counteract those side effects. There are options, but communication is key.
That makes perfect sense. It's all about being proactive and advocating for your own health. It's your body, and you have the right to ask questions and make informed decisions. Now, the book also touches on recreational substances like alcohol, marijuana, and steroids, which can have a pretty significant impact on sexual health as well.
Absolutely. These substances can definitely affect your body in various ways, and that includes your sexual function. Let's start with alcohol. We all know excessive drinking isn't good for you, but when it comes to sexual health, it can be particularly harmful. Not only can it suppress testosterone production, but it can also damage the liver, which plays a vital role in regulating hormones.
So while a glass of wine with dinner might be fine, those weekend benders are probably not doing us any favors.
Exactly. Moderation is key with everything.
And what about marijuana? I've heard conflicting information about its effects on sexual health. Some people say it enhances things, while others say it has the opposite effect. What's the real deal?
It's a bit more complex than a simple yes or no. While marijuana can lead to relaxation in the short term, which some people find enhances arousal, long-term use can actually lower testosterone levels and desensitize those dopamine receptors in your brain, leading to reduced sexual desire and motivation over time.
So it's not exactly the miracle herb some people make it out to be. It sounds like it could be a temporary fix, but might create bigger problems down the road.
That's a good way to put it. It's important to be aware of the potential long-term consequences.
And then there's steroid use, which I know can have some pretty drastic effects on the body.
That's right. Anabolic steroids can actually shrink the testicles and basically shut down the body's natural testosterone production.
Wow, that sounds pretty serious.
It is, and the book features a really powerful case study about a young man named Alex whose steroid use severely impacted his testosterone levels and led to ED. It's a stark reminder of the potential risks associated with unregulated substance use.
That's a sobering story. It really highlights the importance of prioritizing your health and seeking professional guidance if you're struggling with substance abuse.
Absolutely. There's no shame in seeking help.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about lifestyle changes, the sneaky role of medications, and the impact of recreational substances. It's clear that there are a lot of factors that can contribute to ED, and it's not always as simple as people think.
Exactly. It's a multifaceted issue. And understanding the underlying causes is crucial for finding effective solutions.
So now that we've laid the groundwork, let's dive into the world of medical treatments. We'll explore everything from those famous little blue pills to some cutting-edge therapies you might not even know about. Stay tuned.
Yeah, this can be good.
Okay, so we've talked about lifestyle changes and those sneaky medication side effects. But now let's get into the actual medical treatments for ED. I think when most people hear ED treatment, they immediately think of Viagra.
Yeah, that's definitely the most well-known one, but it's not the only option out there. Viagra, along with Cialis and Levitra, they all belong to a class of drugs called PDE5 inhibitors.
Okay, PDE5 inhibitors. That sounds kind of intimidating. How would those work exactly?
Well, they're basically like nitric oxide's best friend. Remember how we talked about nitric oxide being essential for relaxing those blood vessels in the penis? Well, PDE5 inhibitors enhance the effects of nitric oxide, making those blood vessels even more relaxed and allowing for better blood flow.
So it's like they're giving that blood flow a little extra push in the right direction.
Precisely. And there's actually a newer PDE5 inhibitor called Stendra, which is gaining popularity because it works much faster than Viagra. We're talking within 15 minutes, compared to Viagra's 30 to 60 minutes. Plus, it tends to have fewer side effects.
Oh, that's good to know, especially for anyone who's a bit hesitant about side effects. But the book also mentions something called shockwave therapy, which sounds a bit like something out of a superhero movie. Is that something people are actually using for ED?
It does sound futuristic, right? But it's a real thing, and it's becoming increasingly popular. As a non-invasive treatment option, it basically uses low-intensity sound waves to stimulate the growth of new blood vessels in the penis.
So it's like giving your blood flow system a tune-up from the inside out.
That's a great way to put it, and the research is pretty promising. Many men who undergo shockwave therapy regain the ability to have natural erections, and the effects can last for several years.
That's pretty amazing. No needles, no surgery, just sound waves doing their magic. But I know some people are really needle phobic. So are there any other non-invasive options besides shockwave therapy?
Well, there's the vacuum erection device, often called a VED. It might not sound very glamorous, but it can be effective. Basically, it creates a vacuum that draws blood into the penis, and then a tension ring is applied to maintain the erection.
Okay, so it's a bit more mechanical, but it gets the job done.
Exactly. And then there are penile injections, which involve injecting medication directly into the penis to help relax the muscles and increase blood flow.
I'll admit injections sound a bit intimidating. Are those usually a first-line treatment, or are they more for specific situations?
They're usually considered when other treatments haven't been successful, or in cases where the ED is more severe. They do have a very high success rate, but as you can imagine, some men find them a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can see why. So those are kind of like the next step up if the other options aren't working.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the option of penile implants. This is usually considered a last resort when all other treatments have been exhausted.
So implants are kind of like the big guns.
You could say that they involve surgically placing either inflatable or semi-rigid rods into the penis. It's a more permanent solution, but it has a very high satisfaction rate among men who choose this route.
So it sounds like there's a whole spectrum of treatment options out there, from lifestyle changes to medication to more invasive procedures. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly, and that's why it's so crucial to consult with a qualified urologist to determine the best approach for each individual's unique situation.
Okay, that makes sense. You wouldn't just try to fix your car without taking it to a mechanic. So why would you treat your own body any differently?
Exactly. It's important to seek expert guidance.
All right, so we've covered the physical side of things pretty thoroughly, but let's not forget about the mental and emotional aspects of ED, because we all know stress and anxiety can wreak havoc on our bodies, including our sexual function. The book dives into this concept of the anxiety loop, which sounds pretty terrifying. Can you explain what that is and why it's such a big deal?
Well, the anxiety loop is this vicious cycle that can really trap men struggling with ED. It often starts with an episode of ED, maybe due to stress, fatigue, or even just a random off day. But then the fear of it happening again starts to creep in, and that anxiety actually makes it more likely to happen again.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You worry about it so much that you end up making it worse?
Exactly. And it's not just psychological. The stress hormones released when you're anxious, like cortisol and adrenaline, actually interfere with the physiological processes needed for an erection.
Wow, so it's like your own body is working against you. That's got to be incredibly frustrating.
It is for many men, and this anxiety can spill over into other areas of life, affecting relationships, self-esteem, and overall well-being.
I can only imagine. The book mentions a guy named Daniel who got caught in this anxiety loop. And his story really highlights the emotional toll it can take. He started avoiding intimacy altogether because he was so afraid of failing.
Yeah, Daniel's story is unfortunately all too common. Men often feel ashamed or embarrassed to talk about ED, which just makes the problem worse. It's so important to remember that you're not alone in this.
Absolutely. Bottling it is only creates more stress and isolation. So how can someone break free from this anxiety loop? Is it just a matter of thinking positive, or are there more concrete strategies?
Well, positive thinking can definitely help, but it's often not enough on its own. The book suggests some really practical tools, like mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
I've dabbled in mindfulness, but I'll admit I'm not sure how it applies to ED. I always thought of it as something you do for relaxation or stress management.
It's definitely great for that, but it can also be incredibly helpful for managing performance anxiety. Mindfulness techniques, like focusing on your breath or body sensations, can help to calm your nervous system and quiet those racing thoughts that fuel the anxiety loop. It's like hitting the pause button on your stress response.
Okay, I can see how that would be helpful in the moment. And what about CBT?
CBT is more about identifying and challenging those negative thought patterns that contribute to the problem. It helps you reframe those thoughts and develop more helpful coping strategies. So instead of thinking, I'm going to fail, you might start thinking, I'm going to focus on being present and enjoying the experience, regardless of the outcome.
So it's like rewiring your brain to think differently about the whole situation.
Exactly. And the book also mentions some simple breathing techniques, like the 4-7-8 method, which can quickly lower your heart rate and promote relaxation.
That's great. I love that these are things anyone can try. No fancy equipment or expensive therapy sessions required. And it's important to remember that ED isn't always just about performance anxiety. It can also be linked to depression, right?
Absolutely. Depression can impact libido and sexual function in several ways. It can mess with your serotonin levels, which are important for sexual desires, and it often leads to fatigue, making it harder to muster the energy for intimacy.
Plus, some antidepressants like SSRIs can actually worsen ED as a side effect, which is kind of ironic considering they're supposed to be helping you feel better.
That's a really important point. If you're taking antidepressants and experiencing ED, it's crucial to talk to your doctor. They might be able to adjust your dosage or switch you to a different medication that doesn't have that side effect.
So it's not just about treating the mental health issue in isolation. It's about addressing the whole picture, including any potential medication side effects.
Exactly. It's about taking a holistic approach, recognizing the interconnectedness of your physical and mental health, and finding solutions that address all aspects of your well-being.
And speaking of interconnectedness, the book doesn't shy away from the importance of involving your partner in this journey. After all, ED affects both people in a relationship.
Absolutely. Open and honest communication with your partner is crucial. Talking about it can reduce feelings of shame, foster understanding, and help you both navigate the challenges together. It can actually bring you closer as a couple.
I love that the book encourages couples to explore alternative forms of intimacy, like a sensate focus exercises and erotic massage. Those sound like great ways to connect on a deeper level, regardless of whether penetration is involved.
These practices can be incredibly beneficial because they shift the focus away from performance anxiety and help couples rediscover pleasure and connection in new and exciting ways.
It's about expanding your definition of intimacy and finding ways to nurture that connection beyond the purely physical aspect.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that intimacy is a journey, not a destination. It's about ongoing exploration, communication, and a willingness to adapt and grow together.
I think that's a beautiful message, and it really ties into the book's overall theme of redefining intimacy. In part 3, we can unpack that a bit more. It seems like this book is not just about fixing a physical problem. It's about a much deeper exploration of intimacy and connection. So we've talked about the physical side of ED and the emotional aspects, but this idea of like refining intimacy really stuck with me. It feels like we often think of intimacy as just being about sex, but this book seems to be suggesting a much broader perspective.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Chapter 6 of the book is all about expanding our understanding of intimacy. It encourages us to think beyond just penetrative sex and to embrace those emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual dimensions of connection.
Right. It's about acknowledging that intimacy isn't just a physical act. It's about feeling seen and understood and cherished by your partner on like multiple levels.
Exactly, and they share this really heartwarming story in the book about a couple, Ahmed and Ayesha, who decided to prioritize what they called connection nights, where they would focus on non-sexual touch, deep conversations, and shared activities. And it really strengthened their relationship. even though Ahmed was dealing with ED.
Wow, that's beautiful. It shows that intimacy can thrive even when there are challenges in the bedroom. It's about finding those other ways to connect and nurture the bond.
Absolutely. And the book goes on to offer some really practical communication tips. For couples who are dealing with ED, it emphasizes the importance of open dialogue, empathy, and avoiding blame. It's about approaching the situation as a team, not as adversaries.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall into that blame game, especially when you're both feeling frustrated and vulnerable. But it sounds like the key is to create a safe space for open and honest communication.
Exactly. And beyond just talking, the book also introduces some alternative forms of intimacy that couples can explore, like sensual touch exercises, erotic massage, and even sharing fantasies.
I love that. It's about finding ways to keep the spark alive and maintain a sense of connection, even if penetrative sex isn't always possible or desired.
Right. And it's also important to challenge those traditional definitions of masculinity that often put so much pressure on men to perform sexually.
Yeah, it's almost like we've created this cultural narrative that a man's worth is tied to his sexual prowess, which is incredibly damaging and unrealistic.
It is. And the book really encourages readers to embrace a broader understanding of what it means to be a man, one that encompasses vulnerability, emotional intelligence, and a willingness to prioritize connection over conquest.
I think that's such an important message, not just for men struggling with ED, but for all men. It's about breaking free from those limiting beliefs and embracing a more holistic view of masculinity.
Exactly. The book even takes it a step further by exploring cultural perspectives on intimacy, highlighting how different societies view and approach sexual well-being.
That's fascinating. I imagine there's a lot we can learn from other cultures.
There is. It can help us broaden our perspectives and challenge those assumptions we often make about what's normal or healthy when it comes to sex and intimacy.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways you want listeners to remember?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway ED is not a life sentence. It's not a sign that you're broken or less of a man. It's a health issue. And like many health issues, it can be addressed with the right knowledge, tools, and support.
It's about reclaiming your power and taking control of your sexual job. And this book provides a really comprehensive roadmap for doing just that.
It does. It empowers you to understand the underlying causes of ED, make those lifestyle changes we talked about, seek professional help when needed, and explore that wider range of intimacy that we've been discussing.
So it's a journey, and it might be ups and downs along the way, but it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. And it's never too late to start. Even small changes can make a significant difference.
And sometimes facing a challenge like ED can actually lead to positive transformations in other areas of your life. It can be a catalyst for personal growth, for deepening your relationships, and for redefining what truly matters to you.
That's a beautiful way to put it. This book doesn't just offer solutions for ED. It offers a path toward a more fulfilling and authentic life.
Well said. I'm so glad we had a chance to dive into this book together. It's been an eye-opening and inspiring conversation.
It has. And to our listeners, we encourage you to take what you've learned today and use it to